The bailiff's voice didn't shake when he said it. That was the worst part. Evelyn Moore stood at the defense table with her wrists chained to a belt that cut into her hips every time she breathed too deeply. 68 years old. Skin drawn tight from years of bad sleep and worse meals. A woman who used to mop school hallways after everyone went home, now being measured as a problem the state could finally erase. On the charge of first-degree murder, the judge began, eyes pinned to paper like the paper was more human than she was. Evelyn stared straight ahead, not because she was brave, because she'd learned that pleading didn't change what people had already decided. The jurors sat in a neat row, faces turned toward the bench, avoiding her like eye contact could stain them. The prosecutor didn't look at her at all. He had the satisfied stillness of a man already thinking about lunch. The court sentences you to death. The words hit the room, and the room changed. A tremor moved through the benches. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." A woman near the back made a sound like she'd been punched in the stomach. Evelyn's knees softened, not from fear of dying, but from the sudden, unbearable thought that her whole life could end as a lie. No more quiet mornings with a cup of cheap coffee. No more folding laundry in the sunlight that used to spill through her kitchen window. No more tending the tiny tomato plant she kept alive like it was proof she could still make something grow. Her public defender rose too fast, papers sliding in his hands. "Your Honor, we object, this is." The judge lifted one palm. A small gesture. A final door closing. The prosecutor snapped his briefcase shut with the neat satisfaction of a man who believed the world was ordered and he was the one doing the ordering. Evelyn swallowed hard and tasted metal. She wasn't looking for mercy anymore. She was looking for meaning. And then, before the judge could finish the sentence, before the court could move on to the next disposable case, the doors at the back opened. Not a frantic shove. Not a chaotic interruption. 3 men stepped into the aisle like they belonged there. One in a crisp suit with the controlled gaze of someone who'd argued against powerful people and won. One with calm hands, steady as a surgeon's, eyes scanning Evelyn the way you check a heartbeat. And one who didn't rush, didn't perform, just watched the room like he could see every wire holding it together. They didn't shout. They didn't beg. They walked straight to Evelyn. The man on her right placed a hand on her shoulder, firm, grounding, the way someone touches you when they're trying to remind you that you are real. The other stood close enough that the chain around her waist looked smaller. Evelyn's breath caught. Her eyes moved over their faces like her mind refused to finish the sentence her heart had started. The judge frowned. "This is highly irregular. Identify yourselves." The first man spoke, clear and controlled. "My name is Lucas Moraes, civil rights attorney." The second, equally calm. "Aaron Morchan, trauma surgeon." The third voice was quiet, but it carried. "Noah Moore Smith, cybersecurity." The courtroom shifted again, confusion, curiosity, annoyance, until Lucas looked at Evelyn the way you look at someone you've spent your whole life trying to get back to. And he said, simply, like it was the only truth that mattered, "She's our mother." For a second, the room forgot how to breathe. Evelyn didn't cry. Not yet. Her face didn't break. Not yet. Because the shock wasn't that 3 grown men claimed her. The shock was that the past, her buried, stolen, impossible past, had just stood up in a courtroom and refused to stay dead. The judge demanded an explanation. The prosecutor protested. The bailiff tightened his grip. But Evelyn's eyes stayed on the three men in front of her, searching for a memory she wasn't sure she deserved to keep. And as the courtroom argued about procedure, Evelyn's mind slipped backwards. To a night when rain hit her windows like thrown gravel. To a knock at her door that wasn't polite, but desperate. And to three small boys standing in the dark, shivering, hungry, and running from a man who believed children were property. 25 years earlier, Evelyn Moore opened that door. And everything that happened in this courtroom started right there. Before we begin, tap subscribe so you never miss the next story. The rain that night didn't fall like the weather. It felt like an accusation. It came sideways, hard enough to make the gutters choke and the streetlights blur into pale halos. Wind shoved at Evelyn Moore's little house as if trying to pry it loose from the block and send it drifting away with everything else she'd already lost. Inside, the place was quiet in the way a home gets quiet when it's been holding its breath for years. Evelyn stood at her kitchen sink with a chipped mug warming her hands. The clock over the stove ticked too loud, and the heater made that uneven clicking sound like it couldn't decide whether to keep going. Her work shoes sat by the door, still damp from the school's tiled hallways. She had come home late again because the new principal wanted the floors to shine like money, and Evelyn's paychecks never did. She'd been widowed long enough that grief had stopped feeling like a fresh wound and started feeling like a second skin. No one called. No one knocked. The neighborhood was the kind of place where people learned not to bother each other unless they had to. Evelyn took a sip of coffee that had gone bitter and lukewarm, and she let her eyes drift to the small window over the sink. Rain streaked down it in frantic lines. Then the power flickered. A brief dimming, a stutter in the light bulb, the television's small blue glow in the living room winking like an eyelid. Evelyn exhaled through her nose. Of course, she muttered, as if the storm could hear her and felt petty. She set the mug down and reached for the dish towel, meaning to wipe the counter, to do something with her hands. It was what she did when her mind wandered too close to the places it couldn't afford to visit: hospital corridors from years ago, funeral flowers, bills that always arrived with more confidence than kindness. That's when she heard it. Not thunder. Not the wind. A sound at the door. 3 short raps, uneven, urgent. Like someone knocking with knuckles that had already been used to apologize for something. Evelyn froze. Her first instinct wasn't curiosity. It was a caution. Storms made people stupid. Storms made people desperate. And desperate people knocked on the wrong doors. She moved toward the entryway slowly, one hand lifting the dish towel like it could protect her. The porch light outside cast a weak, trembling glow through the glass pane. Another knock came, louder this time. Then a voice, small and strained, swallowed by rain. "Ma'am, please." Evelyn's chest tightened. She leaned closer, trying to see through the warped glass. A shadow shifted on the porch. There were rules in her head she'd learned the hard way. Don't open the door at night. Don't invite trouble into a house that can't afford repairs. Don't believe every story that shows up wet and shaking. But there was something else too. A mother's reflex, even when you're no one's mother. Evelyn slid the chain on the door into place before she unlatched it. Just enough caution to let her conscience breathe. Then she opened it a few inches. Cold air lunged in. Rain misted her face. The porch smelled like soaked wood and wet grass. And there they were. 3 boys huddled close together, shoulders pressed like they were trying to merge into one body so the world couldn't pick them off separately. The oldest was maybe 11, too young to have that kind of guardedness in his eyes, but he wore it anyway. His hair was plastered to his forehead, and he stood half a step forward, like he'd decided his job was to be the wall. Behind him was a smaller boy, maybe 9, arms wrapped around his ribs as if holding himself together. His lips had a bluish tint from cold, and when he breathed, it sounded like he'd been running on borrowed air. The third boy, quiet, still, looked past Evelyn and into her house as if he was measuring exits and hiding places, as if he'd learned that a room could turn dangerous in the time it took to blink. Evelyn's eyes dropped to their clothes. Thin. Not just wet-worn. Sleeves too short, shoes too big on one, too small on another. And on the smallest boy's cheek, a bruise the shape of a thumb. Evelyn's throat went dry. The older boy swallowed and spoke again, voice cracking under the effort to keep it steady. "Please," he said. Just for a minute. We can't go back." Evelyn felt the world was narrow to that sentence. We can't go back. Those words didn't belong to children. Those words belonged to people who had already seen what happened when you did. She tightened her grip on the door. "What's your name?" she asked, and she hated that her voice sounded thin. She wanted to sound like someone who knew what to do. The older boy hesitated, then answered like the truth might cost him something. "Lucas." The smaller one coughed, painful, wet. Lucas shifted instantly, putting an arm out in front of him without looking, protected by muscle memory. "And you?" Evelyn asked gently. "Aaron," the injured boy whispered. The quiet boy didn't speak. His eyes flicked to Lucas, waiting. Lucas nodded once, barely noticeable. "Noah," the quiet one said, voice soft but precise. Evelyn took them in again, 3 names that didn't sound like trouble. 3 names that sounded like children who had once been safe somewhere. Behind her, the heater clicked again. Inside her house was warm. Outside, the rain looked like it would never stop. Evelyn knew what letting them in meant. It meant responsibility. It meant risk. It meant a line crossed that you couldn't uncross once your foot hit the other side. She also knew what leaving them out meant. It meant she would go back to her cold coffee and her ticking clock and pretend she didn't hear the way Aaron's cough broke apart in his chest. It meant she would sleep, and tomorrow she would mop floors with the memory of 3 faces on her porch like a stain that wouldn't lift. Evelyn's gaze drifted past them into the darkness. For a moment, she saw nothing but rain. Then, far down the street, a pair of headlights slowed. Not passing. Watching. Crawling. Evelyn's skin prickled. Lucas saw her looking. His eyes sharpened, panic flashing through the cracks in his control. "Please," he said again, and this time his voice wasn't asking for shelter. It was asking for time. Evelyn's decision came out of her mouth before she could let fear negotiate it down. "Come in," she said. Lucas didn't move at first. Like he didn't trust the words. Like he'd been tricked before by kind voices. Evelyn unhooked the chain, swung the door wider, and stepped back. "Now," she added, firmer. "Before you freeze." They moved fast the moment permission became real, feet slipping on the porch boards, shoulders bumping as they squeezed past. Noah came in last, eyes still scanning the street through the gap like he didn't believe doors could keep danger out. Evelyn shut the door, slid the deadbolt, and for a second just stood there with her back against it. 3 children were inside her home. The house felt smaller. The air felt charged. Lucas stood in the entryway like he wasn't sure where to put his hands. Aaron swayed slightly, and Evelyn noticed then that his sleeve was darker on one side, not just rain. Blood. Sit, she said, pointing toward the couch. All of you. Aaron lowered himself carefully, wincing. Noah sat rigidly at the edge, ready to jump. Lucas didn't sit at all, he hovered, eyes locked on Evelyn like he was waiting for the price of her kindness. Evelyn crossed the room and grabbed an old blanket from the hall closet. She handed it to Aaron first, then Noah. Lucas didn't reach for it. Evelyn held another blanket out to him anyway. You too. He hesitated, then took it with a tight nod, like accepting warmth was its own kind of vulnerability. Kitchen, Evelyn said. I'll get you something hot. She moved on instinct, opening cupboards, checking what she had. A half loaf of bread. Peanut butter. A can of soup that had been waiting for a day she didn't have the energy to cook. Not much. But it was something. As the soup heated on the stove, she stole glances over her shoulder. Aaron's hand shook as he tried to wrap the blanket around himself. Noah's eyes never stopped moving. Lucas stood in the middle of her living room like a guard dog who had forgotten he was also a kid. Evelyn set 3 mismatched bowls on the coffee table. Soup first, then bread. She poured water into cups and watched their faces react to the smell. Aaron's eyes filled with tears he clearly didn't want. Noah swallowed like the scent alone hurt. Lucas blinked hard and looked away. Evelyn sat across from them, careful not to crowd, and waited. People talked when they were ready. You couldn't scrub the truth out of someone with pressure. They ate like they didn't know if they'd be allowed to finish. Evelyn watched Lucas give Aaron the bigger piece of bread without making a show of it. She watched Noah tuck the cup closer to his chest, warmth guarded like something someone might steal. When Aaron shifted, Evelyn saw the cut more clearly along his forearm, ragged, hastily wrapped in a dirty strip of cloth. Beneath it, more bruises shadowed his skin. Evelyn's stomach turned. Who did that? She asked quietly. Silence. Lucas's jaw clenched. His eyes dropped to the floor like looking at Evelyn would pull the answer out of him. Noah, Evelyn said softly, you're watching the windows like you expect someone to come through them. Noah didn't deny it. Lucas finally spoke, voice low. He's looking for us. Who is? Evelyn asked. Lucas's eyes lifted. In them was a kind of hatred that didn't belong in a child's face, and fear layered under it like ice. A man, Lucas said. He says we're his. The words landed heavy. Evelyn felt her hands curl into fists in her lap, nails pressing into skin. A lifetime of being quiet in other people's buildings, cleaning up other people's messes, taught her how to swallow anger. But something about he says we're broke clean through that training. Evelyn leaned forward. Do you have parents? Aaron shook his head quickly, too fast. Lucas's expression tightened. Noah stared at his bowl. They took us, Lucas said. From places nobody checks. Evelyn's mouth went cold. Before she could ask the next question, a sound drifted in through the storm, faint, but real. A car door closing. Then footsteps in the wet. Slow. Deliberate. Not the hurried steps of someone lost in rain, steps of someone who didn't mind getting wet. Noah's head snapped toward the front window. Lucas went still, every muscle tightening like a wire pulled taut. Aaron's spoon clinked against the bowl. Evelyn stood, moving without thinking. She walked to the curtain and peered through the narrow gap. A sedan sat at the curb, engine idling, headlights off. A shadow moved on the sidewalk near her porch, just outside the reach of the porch light. The rain made everything smear and shimmer, but Evelyn could feel the shape of attention. Someone was there, looking at her house. Evelyn turned back to the boys. Their faces were pale now, not from the cold, from recognition. Lucas's voice came out like a breath that couldn't afford to be loud. "That's him." Evelyn's heart thudded once, hard. In that instant she understood something with terrifying clarity. Those boys hadn't brought rain into her home. They'd brought a man. A man who thought children could be owned. A man who believed paperwork or threats could turn human beings into property. Evelyn looked at Aaron's shaking hands, at Noah's rigid posture, at Lucas standing between them and the door like he'd already decided he would die first if he had to. Evelyn walked to the entryway closet and opened it. "Back room," she whispered. "Now. Quiet." They moved fast, silent as practiced. Noah didn't ask where. Lucas didn't argue. Aaron clutched the blanket and followed, eyes wide. Evelyn led them down the hall to the small laundry room at the back of the house, behind the kitchen. She opened the narrow door to a storage space, old boxes, extra towels, a mop bucket. "It's not comfortable," she said, voice steady with effort, "but it'll hide you." Lucas looked at her like he wanted to say something, like he wanted to promise he'd pay her back or warn her not to do this. But time ran out before words could form. Evelyn guided them inside and shut the door most of the way, leaving just a crack for air. Then she returned to the living room and stood again with her back near the front door, listening. Footsteps climbed the porch. A pause. A knock. This one wasn't uneven. It wasn't desperate. It was confident. Polite. As if the man on the other side believed the world opened when he asked. Evelyn closed her eyes once, quickly, and drew in a breath. In her mind, she saw the courtroom from the future, chains, orange fabric, a judge who didn't look at her. But she didn't know any of that yet. All she knew was this. There were 3 children in her house. And someone outside wanted to take them back. Evelyn opened her eyes and stepped toward the door. Not to surrender. To stand between. Evelyn opened the door. The chain stayed latched, just enough space for her to see, just enough space to keep a body out. A man stood on her porch like he belonged there. Not soaked and shivering like the boys. Not frantic like someone lost in a storm. He wore a dark coat that looked expensive even under rain, the collar turned up neatly, water beating on the fabric as if it couldn't penetrate. His hair was slicked back, untouched by wind. His face carried the smooth patience of someone who never had to rush. Behind him, down on the sidewalk, a second shape lingered near the idling sedan, broad shoulders, hands in pockets, head turned slightly, watching the street like a guard. The man on the porch smiled at Evelyn with polite restraint, as if they were neighbors discussing property lines. "Good evening," he said. His voice was calm. Warm, even. "I'm sorry to bother you so late." Evelyn didn't return the smile. "What do you want?" she asked. His eyes moved over her shoulder, not greedy, not panicked, clinical. Measuring. Noticing. "I'm looking for 3 boys," he said. "They're frightened. Confused. They have a habit of running when they shouldn't." Evelyn felt her pulse tighten at the base of her throat. She kept her face still. "No boys here," she said. The man's gaze returned to her, and the smile held. "I see." He reached into the inside of his coat slowly, deliberately, so she wouldn't panic, so she would understand he controlled the room even from the porch. He pulled out a leather wallet, flipped it open, and held something up in the crack of the door. An ID. A seal. Official enough to make your stomach sink. "My name is Victor Hale," he said. "I'm their legal guardian." Evelyn stared at the badge without taking it. "If you're their guardian, why are they running from you?" Victor's smile widened by a fraction. "Children misunderstand discipline. They dramatize. They tell stories. You know how it is." Evelyn's hand tightened around the edge of the door. "You can't take care of kids like that," she said. Victor's eyes sharpened, almost imperceptibly. "Mrs. Moore," Evelyn said. "Mrs. Moore," Victor repeated, tasting the name like a fact to file away. "I appreciate your concern. Truly. But this is not your problem. If you've seen them, if they came to you for shelter, I assure you I can make it worth your while." He slid something else into view. A folded envelope. Even through the narrow crack, Evelyn could see the thickness of it. Crisp corners. Cash. "I'm not asking you to risk anything," Victor continued, voice gentle. "I'm offering you a simple way to do the right thing." Evelyn looked at the envelope, then back at his face. He was so composed it made her skin crawl. The storm screamed around him and he acted like he could quiet it with a sentence. Behind her, down the hall, she could almost feel Lucas's eyes on her back. Noah listening for every shift in tone. Aaron trying not to cough. Evelyn drew in a careful breath. "You don't get to buy what you did to them," she said quietly. Victor's smile didn't fall. "It didn't have to. I'm afraid you don't understand the situation." "I understand enough," Evelyn said, and her voice surprised her, steady, low, full of the heat she'd been trained to swallow. "I saw the bruises. I heard how they breathe. I heard what that oldest one said. Children aren't property." For the first time, Victor's eyes cooled. The warmth drained out of them like someone turned off a light. "Mrs. Moore," he said, still calm. "You live in a small house. In a neighborhood where the police take their time. You work a job that barely pays for your groceries. I'm not saying this to threaten you. I'm saying it so you'll understand how easily a good deed can become a mistake." Evelyn felt fear flicker, but she held it behind her ribs where it couldn't touch her face. "I'm not giving them to you," she said. Victor regarded her for a long moment, rain sliding down his coat, his hair still perfect. Then he nodded once, like she'd confirmed something. "All right," he said softly. "You've made your choice." He tucked the wallet away, tucked the envelope away. No anger. No raised voice. No violence on the porch. Only a calm conclusion. As he turned to leave, he paused. His head tilted back toward her door, and he spoke the words like a promise he'd said many times before. "I always recover what's mine." Then he stepped off the porch, walked to his sedan, and disappeared into the rain. Evelyn stood with her forehead against the door after it shut, listening to the engine fade. Her hands were shaking now that the danger had moved out of sight. From the hall, Lucas's voice came small. "Is he gone?" Evelyn swallowed. "For tonight," she said. She didn't add what her bones already knew. Men like that didn't stop. Victor came again in daylight. That was the part Evelyn never forgot, how ordinary he made it. 3 days after the storm, a black sedan rolled up in front of her house under clean blue sky. Victor stepped out in a tailored suit as if he were arriving at a charity luncheon. With him were two people, one a social worker in a beige cardigan clutching a clipboard, the other a uniformed officer who kept his hands folded politely in front of him. Victor carried a slim folder. He knocked once. When Evelyn opened the door, he offered the same neat smile. "Mrs. Moore," he said. "May we come in?" Evelyn's heart hammered, but she didn't step aside. "You have no right." Victor held up the folder. "Actually, I do." He opened it and produced papers with stamps and signatures, guardianship documents, custody transfers, names that looked official enough to make the social worker's eyes soften with relief. "These boys were placed under my care after an unfortunate situation," Victor said. "They've run before. It happens. I'm grateful you kept them safe, but it's time to return them." The social worker looked at Evelyn with a practiced expression, sympathy pressed into professionalism. "If you cooperate," she said gently, "we can make this very simple." Victor slid another envelope onto the top of the folder, as if it were part of the paperwork. "A token," he said, voice low, reasonable. "For your trouble. For your kindness." Evelyn stared at the envelope. Then she looked past them, into the car. Through the tinted glass, she saw a shape in the back seat. A boy's small face, turned away. Her stomach twisted. Evelyn's voice came out rough. "Where did you get those papers?" Victor's smile didn't move. "From the court." "And the bruises?" Evelyn asked, stepping forward now, not backing down. "From the court too?" The officer shifted uncomfortably, but Victor didn't. "These are allegations," Victor said. "And allegations can destroy lives." Evelyn let out a breath that sounded like a laugh without humor. Then she did something she didn't know she had the courage to do. She took the folder from Victor's hands. The social worker's eyes widened. "Ma'am." Evelyn didn't look at her. She looked at Victor. "You think because you printed words on paper," Evelyn said, "you can rewrite what those boys lived through." Victor's gaze fixed on her, steady as glass. Evelyn ripped the envelope first. Money spilled, clean bills, too clean, like sin that hadn't been handled enough to show. Then she tore the top sheet of the folder straight down the middle. The sound was sharp. Final. The officer took one step forward. The social worker made a small, helpless noise. Victor didn't move. Evelyn tore the next page. And the next. "These boys are children," she said, voice shaking now with fury she'd held in for years. "Not yours. Not anyone's." Victor watched the paper fall like confetti at his feet. When she finished, Evelyn held the torn edges in her hands, breathing hard. Victor glanced down at the scraps, then back up at her face. His voice didn't rise. It never did. "You've misunderstood what's happening," he said quietly. "But you will understand. Eventually." Evelyn's eyes stung. "Leave." Victor nodded once, as if granting a request. He turned to the officer and the social worker with calm authority. "They're frightened," he said, voice warm again. "She's frightened. It's all very emotional." Then he looked back at Evelyn. "I always recover what's mine," he repeated, soft as a lullaby. And the three of them walked away, leaving paper and money scattered across her porch like an insult. Evelyn spent the next years making a home out of what she had. Which wasn't much. She took extra shifts, cleaned offices on weekends, fixed broken cabinet hinges with a butter knife and stubbornness. When the boys outgrew their shoes, she learned to find second-hand ones that still had life in them. When Aaron needed inhalers, she argued with pharmacies until her voice turned raw. Lucas grew into himself like a blade, quiet, watchful, always placing his body between danger and his brothers. He learned to read people the way other kids read comic books. His grades stayed sharp because he treated school like a map out. Aaron stayed gentle, even when life didn't reward it. He learned to cook eggs and soothe nightmares. He carried a softness that made Evelyn both proud and afraid, because soft things got hurt first. Noah watched everything. Fixed the old radio when it died. Took apart a broken clock and made it run again. He didn't talk much, but when he did, it was precise. Like he had decided words were tools, not decorations. Evelyn made routines like armor. Homework at the kitchen table. Dinner before dark. Doors locked. Curtains drawn. No one answers the phone without her. No one talks to strangers about the past. She didn't tell them the full truth about Victor. Not at first. She tried to let them be children. But Victor didn't allow childhood. Not for them. Not for her. The pressure came in quiet ways. A call from the school about concerns. A neighbor suddenly curious about how Evelyn could afford 3 boys. A police cruiser that rolled past her house too slowly, too often. Then the letters arrived, official envelopes with official stamps. A notice about improper guardianship. A warning about unreported income. A request for bank statements. Evelyn stared at the paper and felt Victor's hand in the ink. He didn't show up anymore. He didn't need to. He started using the world. Anonymous tips came in. People said they heard screaming. Said Evelyn hit the boys. Said the boys were involved in theft. Said she was hiding something. One day, Evelyn went to withdraw cash and the teller frowned. "Your account's been flagged," the woman said. "For what?" Evelyn asked, heat rising. The teller lowered her voice. "Suspicious deposits." Evelyn blinked. "I don't have deposits." But the statement showed them small amounts, regular intervals. Money Evelyn had never touched. Like someone was building a story with numbers. Another month, a man in a suit visited her job and asked questions about her hours, her pay, her associates. The principal's tone cooled after that. Evelyn's overtime vanished. Her schedule shifted. Her income tightened. Still, she held the boys together. Because love isn't always warm. Sometimes love is a woman counting coins under a flickering lamp and saying, "We'll be fine," with a voice steady enough to make it true for another day. The setup took years because Victor didn't want Evelyn to lose. He wanted her to be buried. It started with paperwork that didn't match reality. A utility bill in her name for an address she'd never lived at. A loan application she didn't sign. A witness who claimed Evelyn met Victor in a parking lot and took money. When Evelyn tried to fight it, the doors she knocked on didn't open the way hers had. Officials looked at her file and saw what Victor wanted them to see: a poor woman with 3 boys who weren't hers, money she couldn't explain, accusations that stacked up like bricks. Lucas noticed the shift before Evelyn admitted it. "They're building something," he said one night, eyes sharp. They're making you look guilty. Evelyn forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. We keep our heads down. We don't give them a reason. Lucas's jaw clenched. They don't need a reason. She wanted to tell him not to carry that weight. He was a boy, not a soldier. But the truth was, Victor had already drafted him into a war. The harbor came at the end of summer, when the air smelled like salt and rust and storms that hadn't arrived yet. Evelyn had planned it like an escape plan, not a trip. She'd been saving cash in a coffee tin under the sink. Not much, but enough for bus tickets. Enough to get them to a town where no one knew their faces, where the past couldn't follow so easily. They drove out before sunrise in a borrowed car, an old sedan from a coworker who didn't ask too many questions. The boys were quiet, packed tight in the back seat. Aaron's hand kept finding Evelyn's sleeve like he needed to feel she was still there. The harbor was supposed to be a cut-through, a place to meet a man Evelyn trusted to help them catch a bus without paperwork. But when they arrived, Evelyn knew instantly. They were not alone. A van sat near the docks, engine running. Two men leaned against it, relaxed in that particular way men get when they know they have the advantage. Another stood closer to the water, smoking, watching the tide like he had all the time in the world. Lucas whispered, "Mom." Evelyn's grip tightened on the steering wheel. The word hit her hard, Mom, because it was new, because it was earned, because it made her more afraid than any threat ever could. "Stay in the car," she said, voice low. "If I tell you to run." Lucas's eyes flashed. "No." Evelyn looked back at him. "Lucas." He swallowed, and the protest died into something darker. Evelyn stepped out anyway. The dockboards creaked beneath her shoes. The air was damp, metallic. Seagulls circled and screamed like they were laughing at human plans. One of the men smiled at her. "Mrs. Moore," he called. "You've been hard to reach." Evelyn's stomach went cold. Victor wasn't there, of course he wasn't. He didn't need to dirty his hands. She turned slightly, keeping the car and her peripheral vision. "What do you want?" she asked. The man shrugged. "Just the boys." Behind her, the car door opened a fraction. "Lucas," Evelyn hissed without turning. "Don't." The men spread out, slow and easy, like wolves that didn't have to chase. A second man lifted his shirt just enough to show the grip of a gun tucked into his waistband. Evelyn's breath shortened. Then it happened fast. The car door flew open and Lucas, stubborn and brave and furious, stepping out like he could shield his brothers with his body. "Get back!" Evelyn shouted. One of the men's eyes sharpened. A hand moved. Metal flashed. The sound that followed wasn't loud in the way movies make it loud. It was a sharp crack. A violent punctuation. Evelyn saw Lucas flinch, saw his body jerk, and for a fraction of a second, her world narrowed to one unbearable thought. Not him. Please. Not him. Evelyn moved before fear could freeze her. She ran. Not away. Toward. She threw herself between Lucas and the gun without thinking, without calculating, with only one instinct in her bones. Protect. The second shot came. Evelyn felt it like a hammer in her side, impact first, then heat, then a numb bloom spreading through her ribs. Air left her lungs in a broken sound. She staggered, hands reaching for balance that wasn't there. Lucas caught her. Mom! Evelyn's fingers found his shirt and gripped hard. Listen to me, she gasped, forcing her voice through pain. You take your brothers. You run. No, Lucas choked. His face was wet rain? Tears? Both. Evelyn grabbed his jaw with shaking fingers and made him look at her. You live, she whispered, every syllable in order. You hear me? You live. Aaron was crying in the car. Noah's eyes were wide, calculating, already looking for an exit route, already knowing what had to happen even if he hated it. Footsteps thundered closer. Evelyn shoved Lucas with what strength she had left. Go! Lucas's body shook with refusal, but Noah yanked him hard, dragging him back toward the car. Aaron stumbled out, then Noah shoved him forward. They ran. Their shoes slapped wet boards. Their breath tore through their throats. They didn't look back because looking back would have broken them. Evelyn turned toward the men, swaying, blood soaking her shirt. She lifted her hands. I'm here, she said, voice thick. I'm the one you want. The men hesitated, eyes flicking toward the boys disappearing down the dock. Then a siren wailed in the distance. Evelyn's stomach dropped. Not relief, recognition. Victor wasn't just trapping her physically. He was trapping her legally. Police cruisers rolled in fast, tires hissing on wet pavement. Lights flashed against the water. Officers poured out, weapons raised, shouting commands. Evelyn opened her mouth to speak, but the world tilted. Pain surged. The dock spun. She heard an officer bark, on the ground. Hands where I can see them. Evelyn tried to comply, tried to kneel, but her legs buckled. And as she fell, she saw it clear as a stamp on paper. One of the men who'd threatened them stepped back and raised his hands like a victim. Like a witness. Like a story already rehearsed. They cuffed Evelyn on the dock with blood on her hands that wasn't hers. They read her rights while she fought to stay conscious. They told her she was under arrest for assault, for endangerment, for crimes that stacked up faster than she could understand. And somewhere in the chaos, a clean narrative formed, efficient, believable, ready to be delivered. A poor woman. 3 boys. Suspicious money. A violent incident at the harbor. Evelyn tried to speak the truth, but truth is fragile when power has paperwork. In the back of the cruiser, she pressed her forehead to the metal grate and whispered into the dark. Run. Because if Victor couldn't reclaim the boys with his hands, he would reclaim them by erasing the only person who ever chose them. Lucas, Aaron, and Noah disappeared into the world under names that were not theirs, guided by fear in each other and the last command Evelyn gave them. And Evelyn Moore, bleeding, shackled, and framed with surgical precision, was swallowed by the system. Victor Hale didn't need to raise his voice. He had already made the world say guilty for him. 25 years is long enough for a child to become a man. It's long enough for fear to calcify into purpose. For hunger to turn into discipline. For a single command run to become the silent engine behind every choice you make afterward. Lucas Moraes learned the law the way some people learn a language, not because it was interesting, but because it was the only way to survive what had been done to them. He stood in courtrooms where judges spoke like gods and prosecutors spoke like they'd already won, and he built his career on one stubborn refusal: the system didn't get to decide who was disposable. He had a small office that always smelled like paper and cheap coffee. His suits were clean, his eyes were tired. He'd defended men who'd been swallowed by the same machine that had swallowed Evelyn, and when he won, he didn't celebrate the victory like a trophy. He treated it like a debt paid forward. Aaron Morchan lived in a different kind of crisis. The trauma bay didn't care about your past. It didn't care about your name. It cared about blood loss and airway and time. Aaron became the kind of surgeon who could walk into chaos and make it quiet. His hands didn't shake. His voice didn't rise. He learned how to cut damage away and stitch life back together. People called him gifted. His colleagues called him steady. But the truth was simpler than talent. He'd been steady since he was a boy, because someone had once fed him soup while he trembled and told him he mattered. Noah Mooresmith built his world out of invisible things. Networks. Systems. Signals moving under the surface of ordinary life. He had a mind that saw patterns the way others saw faces. He started in community college, then scholarships came, then grants, then a startup that turned into something that people with money began to pay attention to. Noah didn't talk much at conferences. He let results speak. He made security tools that found the cracks people didn't know they had. And every once in a while, late at night, when he couldn't sleep, he'd open an old, worn notebook. In the first pages were 3 names, written in careful block letters, the way a child writes something he's afraid of losing. Evelyn. Lucas. Aaron. Noah. Family wasn't blood to them. Family was the woman who opened the door. Family was the woman who stood in front of a gun. They didn't know where she was. They'd spent years searching in careful, quiet ways, because searching loudly got people killed. They'd found dead ends, sealed records, addresses that led nowhere. And then, one Tuesday morning, the past came looking for them. Lucas was in his office when his assistant stepped in, pale. "There's a call," she said. It's about your mother." Lucas felt the air change. That word, mother, was a knife and a prayer at the same time. He took the call. A reporter's voice, clipped and hungry, poured the information out like it was gossip. "Evelyn Moore has been sentenced. Death row. Execution pending appeal. It's public. It's everywhere now." Lucas couldn't speak for a moment. He stared at the wall above his desk, at a framed photograph he never showed anyone: 3 boys in a borrowed backyard, hair too long, clothes too big, standing beside a woman whose smile looked like something won. "Say it again," Lucas whispered. The reporter repeated it. "Death row." Lucas hung up without saying goodbye. His hands went cold. Then his mind snapped into motion, clean, brutal, focused. He called Aaron first. Aaron answered on the second ring, breathless. Hospital noise in the background. "Lucas?" Aaron said. "What's wrong?" "She's alive," Lucas said. The words cracked. "And they're going to kill her." Silence. Then Aaron's voice lowered, the surgeon in him recognizing emergency the way he recognized bleeding. "Where?" Lucas gave him the state, the county, the courthouse. Aaron didn't ask questions. He didn't hesitate. "I'm coming," he said. "Now." Noah answered last, because Noah always screened his calls. But the moment he heard Lucas's voice, he picked up. "We found her," Lucas said. Noah didn't breathe for a second. Then, very softly, "Is she?" "She's on death row," Lucas said. "They're doing it again." Noah's voice turned flat, dangerous in its calm. "Send me everything." They converged like gravity. Not as boys this time. Not as frightened children clinging to each other in a dark room. As men. As instruments sharpened by years they didn't choose. They met in Lucas's office that night. No cameras. No speeches. Just three brothers sitting around a table, staring at a printed photo from the news article. Evelyn, older. Smaller. Shackled. Her eyes were the same. Aaron's face tightened like he was holding back something hot and violent. Lucas tapped the paper with one finger. "We don't do this separately," he said. "Not again." Noah nodded once. "Together." A promise, spoken like a fact. The first crack in the state story appeared within 48 hours. Lucas pulled transcripts. Court filings. Evidence lists. Witness statements. The case against Evelyn Moore was built like a wall, thick, confident, meant to intimidate anyone who looked too closely. And yet, when Lucas looked closely, it was wrong. Dates didn't align. Witnesses described events from angles they couldn't have seen. A bank trail appeared with the same neat, suspicious deposits. Evelyn had once tried to explain money that arrived like it was being injected into her life from outside. Aaron read the medical examiner's report and frowned. "This doesn't fit," he said, flipping the pages. "They're describing injuries that don't match the timeline. And this is sloppy." Lucas looked up. "Sloppy how?" Aaron's jaw worked. "Like it was written to be believed, not written to be true." Noah sat with the laptop open, fingers moving without noise. He didn't just read the case, he read the infrastructure around it. Court system databases. Evidence storage logs. Chain of custody entries. "Someone touched these records," Noah said finally. "Not recently. Over time. Like they've been grooming the story." Lucas's eyes narrowed. "Victor Hale." Noah's fingers paused. Then he turned the screen toward them. "Victor Hale is dead," Noah said. The words hit the room like a gunshot you don't hear until it's already happened. Lucas stared. "That's impossible." Noah's voice didn't change. "He died 13 years ago. Car accident. Reported. Recorded. Insurance payout." Aaron shook his head once, as if refusing the math. "Then who?" Noah scrolled. "There were transactions after his death," he said. "Under his name. Under his accounts. Like someone kept wearing him." Lucas felt something in his chest tighten, like an old fear waking up with a new face. "Identity theft," Lucas murmured. Noah nodded. "Not theft. Succession." The pieces shifted. Victor had been the hand that knocked. The polished smile. The envelope. But Victor wasn't the machine. He was a mask. And masks only matter if someone's behind them. They found the name through a pattern, not a confession. Noah traced communications from the county's evidence system to an external routing node that shouldn't exist. Lucas subpoenaed what he could and forced what he couldn't. Aaron leaned on hospital contacts to access archived injury photos tied to old harbor cases that had been resolved too cleanly. A name appeared in a file that wasn't supposed to matter. Julian Cross. It showed up as a consultant. A specialist. A fixer called in on sensitive matters. Noah dug deeper. Lucas read every case tied to the name. Aaron checked records from the hospital systems tied to consulting surgeons in prior decades. The more they looked, the clearer the shape became. Julian Cross didn't build power like Victor, with threats and money tossed on porches. Julian built power like a surgeon. Carefully. Quietly. Patiently. He cut away obstacles and stitched together narratives. He wasn't angry. He was precise. They learned what the people whispered about him in back channels and sealed rooms. The surgeon. Then Noah uncovered something that made Lucas's stomach turn. Scholarships. Grants. Chance encounters. Career openings that had come at exactly the right time in each brother's life, moments they'd believed were miracles, or luck, or hard work finally paying attention. Noah laid the documents out like evidence on an operating table. These weren't random, he said. Someone nudged you toward civil rights law. Someone nudged Aaron toward trauma. Someone nudged me toward security. Lucas stared at the paper, throat dry. Why? Noah's eyes lifted. Because those are the tools needed to dismantle what's happening now. Aaron's voice went thin. You're saying, he shaped us. Lucas felt something ugly move through him. All those years, thinking they'd fought their way out. Thinking Evelyn's sacrifice bought them freedom. And now the possibility that even their success had been part of a design. Not to help them. To use them. They didn't find Mara Lynn through official channels. Mara found them. She showed up at Lucas's office without calling, dressed plainly, hair tied back, eyes carrying the kind of exhaustion that comes from staying alive too long. I can help you, she said. Lucas didn't invite her to sit. Who are you? Mara's gaze flicked to the photo of Evelyn on the desk. Someone who knows what that man does. What man? Aaron asked, though he already knew the answer. Mara's mouth tightened. Julian Cross. Noah's posture shifted subtly, attention sharpening. Mara slid a flash drive across the desk. Everything I have, she said. Records. Contacts. Proof he's been moving inside your case for years. Lucas didn't touch it yet. Why? Mara's eyes didn't blink. Because if you're going after him, you need to understand what he'll do when you get close. Aaron leaned forward. And what will he do? Mara's voice dropped. He'll make you choose. Lucas finally took the flash drive. What's the catch? For a moment, Mara's face softened, like grief trying to break through discipline. My brother died, she said. A long time ago. In one of his games. Silence fell. Mara's jaw tightened again. Your mother took you in. You were saved. He wasn't. Lucas's chest tightened. You think this is our fault? Mara's eyes flashed. I think love has consequences people don't want to admit. Aaron's voice went quiet. We were children. Mara stared at him. So was he. Then she exhaled slowly, like forcing herself back into control. I'm not your enemy, she said. But I'm not your fan club either. I want Cross stopped. Noah's voice was calm. And if stopping him costs her? Mara looked at the photo of Evelyn again. I'm not the one who put her there, she said. But her eyes didn't answer the question. The first direct message from Julian Cross arrived the next morning. Not through email. Not through a letter. through a courtroom filing. A sealed motion appeared in the docket, stamped and entered with authority, requesting an expedited execution date for the sake of closure. Lucas read it once, then again, the way you reread something that's trying to kill you. Noah pulled metadata from the document. This was drafted on a private system, he said. Not county. Not state. Someone injected it. Aaron's hands curled into fists. He's accelerating. As if to confirm it, a call came to Lucas's office from an unknown number. Lucas answered, heart steady in his chest in the way it gets steady right before impact. A man spoke on the other end. Calm. Polished. Not Victor. Something colder. Mr. Moraes, the voice said. You've grown into exactly what you were meant to become. Lucas felt his blood turn to ice. Who is this? He said. A quiet sound like amusement. You can call me Julian. Lucas's jaw tightened. You framed her. I completed a process, Julian said, as if discussing a project timeline. Your mother interrupted a system that feeds on the invisible. She made herself visible. Visibility has consequences. Aaron snatched the phone from Lucas's hand. If you touch her. Julian's tone didn't change. I already have. Noah leaned in, eyes sharp. What do you want? Julian paused, as if pleased Noah had spoken. A demonstration, he said. Of what you value. Lucas felt something in him harden. We're not negotiating. Julian's voice stayed gentle. Of course you are. You just don't know it yet. Then he delivered it softly, like a doctor explaining options. You can save her quickly, Julian said. Or you can save your souls. Aaron's breathing went shallow. Julian continued. I will tell you where the final piece of evidence is, the one that collapses the case. In exchange, you will do one thing. Lucas's voice was low. What? Julian's answer was quiet. Kill me. The room went still. Noah's eyes narrowed. Aaron's face went pale with rage. Julian spoke again, almost kind. You've spent your lives becoming instruments of justice. Let's see if you're willing to use violence when it's convenient. If you refuse, she dies. If you accept, she lives, but you become what you hate. A pause. Then, like a blade sliding back into a sheath. Choose. The line went dead. For a long moment, no one spoke. Aaron's voice finally broke the silence, rough. I'll do it. Lucas snapped his head up. No. Aaron's eyes were wet with fury. They're going to execute her, Lucas. Lucas's voice stayed hard. Then we beat him without becoming him. Mara, standing near the doorway, watched them with an unreadable expression. This is what he does, she said. He makes people dirty their own hands. Noah's fingers moved across his keyboard, relentless. There's always a third option. Lucas looked at him. Find it. They built the third option the way Evelyn had built a home, out of scraps, out of stubbornness, out of refusing to accept what power called inevitable. Lucas drafted emergency filings and worked through the night, forcing the court to accept new motions, new evidence requests, new hearings. He didn't beg. He made demands backed by procedure, because procedure was one language the system couldn't ignore without exposing itself. Aaron dug into the medical side, the autopsy inconsistencies, the timeline errors, the sloppy certainty in the state's narrative. He secured affidavits from respected doctors who weren't part of the county's closed circle. He forced reality into the record. Noah went deeper than filings. He didn't hack to destroy. He hacked to reveal. He traced the hidden routing node, mirrored evidence logs, and set up a live capture. He found the moments someone had altered chain of custody entries years ago, fingerprints and timestamps, edits masked as maintenance. He found, at last, what Julian had assumed would stay buried. A recorded confession. Not a dramatic one. A quiet one, Julian speaking to Mara on an old surveillance feed, instructing her on contingency plans, referencing Evelyn by name, referencing the mother as a necessary sacrifice. Mara's face drained when Noah played it. "That's not," she began. Noah didn't accuse her. He simply looked at her. "You were his insurance," Noah said. "You were meant to keep the story alive." Mara's throat worked. "My brother." Julian's voice on the recording cut through her like a scalpel. "Grief is leverage. Use it." Mara's eyes filled with something she had refused to feel for years. Betrayal. Then, fear. Because she realized what she was. A tool. Just like them. Noah didn't stop the video. He let her watch the whole thing. He let the truth do its work without shouting. When it finished, Mara sank into a chair, shaking. "I thought I was stopping monsters," she whispered. Lucas's voice was quiet. "You were feeding one." Mara looked up, tears spilling now, the control finally broken. "I can take you to him," she said. "But he'll have something planned." Aaron's jaw clenched. "Let him." Julian Cross did have something planned. They found it at the Archives building, a dull, government structure where old records lived and cameras watched more than people. Julian had chosen it because it was symbolic and strategic, the place where histories were stored and rewritten. When they arrived, rain had started again, thin, cold, relentless. Inside, the lights were too bright, the hallways too clean, the quiet too deliberate. Mara led them through a side entrance with a keycard she'd kept like a sin. "He's upstairs," she murmured. "Conference room." Noah's earpiece crackled as he monitored the building's systems. "Cameras are looping," he said. "We have 8 minutes before the automated audit flags it." Aaron's eyes scanned exits, angles, the subtle shape of danger. Lucas carried a slim folder under his arm, the court filings ready to upload the moment Noah gave the signal. Not revenge. Exposure. They reached the conference room. Julian sat at the head of the table like he was waiting for a board meeting. He was older than Victor had been. Less handsome. More controlled. His eyes were pale and calm and empty of apology. He smiled at them as if greeting colleagues. "Good," Julian said. "You came together. That's what she taught you, isn't it?" Lucas's voice was steady. "You framed her. You manipulated the system. You manipulated us." Julian didn't deny it. Denial was for people without power. "Yes," he said simply. "And now you're here to decide what kind of men you are." Aaron took one step forward. "Where is the evidence to clear her?" Julian's gaze flicked to Aaron, assessing him like a patient. "Still the fixer," he said mildly. "Always trying to save bodies. What about the soul?" Noah's eyes narrowed. Stop talking. Julian's smile sharpened slightly. Or what? Noah didn't answer. He just tapped his phone. A faint beep sounded somewhere in the building. Julian's eyes didn't move, but the air shifted. Mara stiffened. What did you do? Julian looked at her for the first time with something like disappointment. I gave you purpose, he said. And you broke. Mara's voice trembled. You used my brother. Julian's tone stayed clinical. Your brother was collateral. Like your grief. Like their mother. Lucas felt heat rise behind his eyes. This ends today, he said. Julian leaned back slightly. Then end it, he said softly. Kill me. Save her. Aaron's hands shook with the urge. Lucas's voice didn't. No, Lucas said. We're not doing it your way. Julian's expression remained calm, but his eyes sharpened, curious. Lucas nodded once to Noah. Noah spoke into his mic now. Across the city, in Lucas's office, Noah's remote process executed. Court filings went live. Evidence packets uploaded. The confession recording transmitted to multiple secure endpoints, media, federal oversight, internal affairs, places too large to quietly silence. At the same time, Noah's looped cameras switched back on for a split second, long enough to capture Julian's face, his presence, his calm certainty. Julian's phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at it. For the first time, his control fractured by a millimeter. Aaron stepped forward, voice low. You planted a device. Julian's eyes lifted. Insurance. Mara's face went white. You're going to kill people. Julian's tone was almost bored. Consequences. Aaron didn't move like a man in a story. He moved like a trauma surgeon. He scanned the room, found the panel under the conference table, tore it open with a chair leg, and revealed a compact device wired with ugly precision. His hands went steady. Noah spoke rapidly. Timer? Aaron's eyes flicked. 3 minutes. Lucas's voice was tight. Can you? I can, Aaron said, and he meant it. He worked fast, not heroic, practiced. He cut the correct wire, then another, then used his belt to secure a loose connection. His breath stayed controlled like he was in the operating room with a life on the table. Because he was. The timer stopped. Silence filled the room like a held breath. Julian watched, expression unreadable. No blood, Julian murmured. Interesting. Lucas stepped closer, placing the folder on the table. You wanted us to become you, Lucas said. Instead, we're going to let the world see you. Julian's gaze flicked to the folder, then back to Lucas. You think exposure is justice, he said softly. Justice is a story people tell themselves to sleep at night. Lucas's eyes didn't leave his. Then you're going to have a hard time sleeping, Lucas said. Sirens rose in the distance, real ones this time. Julian looked past them, toward the window, listening to the sound of a system turning on its own. Then he did what Victor never did. He stood. He straightened his cuffs. And for a moment, the mask slipped enough to show what lived beneath it. Not anger. Not fear. A kind of cold respect. Well played, Julian said. Mara's voice broke. I trusted you. Julian's eyes settled on her, and his voice turned almost gentle. You trusted your grief, he said. I merely gave it direction. Mara's body shook. Tears ran freely now, no longer controlled, no longer useful. Just human. You killed him, she whispered. Julian didn't deny it. The door burst open. Officers flooded in. Federal badges. Cameras. People with authority that didn't answer to the county's quiet corruption. Julian didn't run. He allowed the cuffs like a man who understood systems and knew exactly when a move would be pointless. As they led him away, he turned his head slightly toward Lucas, Aaron, and Noah. Go, he said. See if you can bring the dead back. They brought the dead back in a courtroom. Not by magic. By record. By contradiction. By truth lined up so cleanly that even a judge couldn't pretend not to see it. The hearing was chaos, reporters packed in, whispers filling every corner. The prosecutor's confidence had been replaced by a tight, defensive rage. The judge's eyes were no longer indifferent, they were wary, as if the bench suddenly felt less like a throne and more like a spotlight. Evelyn sat shackled again. Older than anyone should have to be. Smaller than the orange fabric made her look. Her hair was threaded with gray. Her hands were steady in her lap, the way hands get when they've accepted too much for too long. Lucas stepped forward and introduced himself into the record. Aaron followed. Noah's evidence came last: digital logs, chain of custody tampering, the confession. The courtroom shifted with each piece like a building discovering cracks in its foundation. Lucas didn't grandstand. He didn't shout. He simply placed truth where lies had been. Aaron testified with calm precision, dismantling the forensic story brick by brick. Noah played the recording. Julian's voice filled the courtroom, cold, methodical, speaking of Evelyn like a problem to be solved. A hush fell so deep you could hear people breathing. The judge's face tightened as he listened, as if every word was a weight added to his conscience. When the recording ended, the prosecutor stood on shaking legs. Objection, he began, but the words sounded weak in his own mouth. The judge lifted a hand. Not to dismiss the defense. To silence the state. His voice, when he spoke, carried the strain of a man forced to look at what he'd helped enable. This court, he said slowly, has been presented with credible evidence of misconduct, fabrication, and manipulation that directly undermines the integrity of the conviction. Evelyn's eyes stayed forward. She didn't dare believe yet. Hope had hurt her too many times. The judge swallowed. Execution is stayed, he said. Effective immediately. A sound moved through the room: relief, shock, grief, something like prayer. The prosecutor's face went slack. Lucas's throat burned. Aaron closed his eyes for 1 second, as if letting himself feel it. Noah's fingers curled tight against his palm, holding the moment like it might vanish if he loosened his grip. The judge looked at Evelyn, then really looked at her. And the courtroom watched a system do something it rarely did in public. Admit failure. I cannot undo what has been done, the judge said, voice rougher now. But I can correct what remains. He drew in a breath. Evelyn Moore, he said, your conviction is vacated. You are exonerated. For a second, Evelyn didn't move. Not because she didn't understand, but because her body didn't trust the sound of mercy. Then Lucas stepped to her side, close enough that his presence felt like an anchor. Aaron did the same on her other side. Noah stood just behind, quiet, watchful, real. Evelyn's lips parted. Her voice came out like a whisper dragged from deep water. "My boys," she said. Lucas's eyes filled, but he kept his voice steady. "We're here," he said. "We're not leaving." Outside the courthouse, cameras screamed for answers. People wanted spectacle. They wanted rage. They wanted to see Evelyn spit venom at the world that had tried to kill her. But Evelyn didn't give them that. She stood on the steps under a gray sky, the air damp, her sons close enough to touch, and she looked smaller than the story the media wanted to sell. Mara stood off to the side, face pale, eyes raw. Evelyn turned toward her. Mara flinched like she expected punishment. Evelyn studied her for a long moment, saw the grief, the guilt, the brokenness that had been sharpened into cruelty and then dulled into regret. "You lost someone," Evelyn said softly. Mara's mouth trembled. I thought you were the reason." Evelyn's voice stayed gentle. "Love didn't kill him." Mara's eyes overflowed. "I helped them hurt you." Evelyn looked at her sons, then back at Mara. "I won't carry more hate," Evelyn said. "I've carried enough." Mara's knees buckled. She covered her face with both hands and sobbed, not performative, not strategic, just human, finally. Lucas watched, jaw tight, anger still alive in him. Aaron's expression was pain and compassion tangled together. Noah's eyes stayed on Mara, not forgiving, not condemning, simply seeing. Evelyn exhaled slowly. Justice, she understood, wasn't the same as revenge. Justice was sunlight on a face that had been kept in darkness. Justice was a record corrected so the lie couldn't outlive the truth. Justice was refusing to let cruelty remake your soul in its image. They walked away from the courthouse without speeches. No victory pose. No triumphant music. Just four people moving forward through wet air, the world still imperfect, the system still flawed, but one woman no longer buried alive inside it. On the sidewalk, Lucas offered his arm. Evelyn took it, not because she was weak, but because she'd spent too long holding herself up alone. Aaron walked on her other side, scanning her face the way he scanned patients already planning how to help her heal. Noah followed close, quiet as ever, eyes on the street, protecting the space around her like he always had. And as they reached the car, Evelyn stopped and looked at them, really looked. "I used to be scared," she said, voice trembling, "that my life wouldn't mean anything." Lucas swallowed hard. It meant everything. Evelyn's eyes shone. "I didn't save you to own you," she whispered. "I saved you so you could live." Aaron's voice broke. "We lived," he said. "And we came back." Noah nodded once, the smallest gesture carrying the weight of 25 years. Family wasn't who claimed you. Family was who chose you again and again, no matter the cost. Subscribe before the next story drops. Comment your thoughts, and I'll see you in the next story.